Welcome to our webinar on navigating ESG reporting and understanding carbon neutrality for products and services. My name is Siu Yin. I'm your host for today. Before we start, please allow me to go through some housekeeping. All lines will be muted during the webinar. If you have any question, please submit your question in the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. The webinar will be recorded and we will be sharing the recording and slides with all attendees after the webinar. At the end of the webinar, I would appreciate if you can take 1 minute to complete a feedback poll before you leave. Thank you very much. And now I'll move on to introducing our speakers for today. We have Wan Mutadio, Wan Abdul Fattah, our Head of Sustainability at BSI Malaysia. Wan leads the sustainability team with a primary focus on greenhouse gas verification, sustainability reporting assurance, carbon neutrality verification, and the certification of sustainable palm oil. We also have with us today Cairo Nizam, our global scheme owner for sustainability and traceability at BSI. Kai works with an international team globally to address challenges on sustainability and traceability, and he is now focusing on developing product-level carbon management solution, life cycle assessment, and advocating for circular economy models. Without further ado, let me hand over to our first speaker for today, Wan Mutadio. Over to you, Wan.
Very good morning, everyone. My name is Wan Mutari. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Again, I am the head of sustainability for BSI Malaysia, and some of the focuses surrounding sustainability topics, greenhouse gas verification. I'll be talking today in terms of how do we actually navigate ESG reporting in Asian markets, Asian economies, Asian countries as well. So let's see. Okay, so the story today is very simple. I'm just gonna basically tell and inform everyone over here what are the current states that we are facing. We'll be talking about a little bit on data because it is the new oil. What BSI can actually do in this space of ESG reporting. A little bit of sharing is caring kind of things for us to give you some of the insights as well. I'll talk a little bit on BSI and sustainability, how we actually walk the talk, and how does it look like until the end of this year. So that is pretty much what I'll be covering today, and of course, a little bit of explanation along the way. So, one thing about being in assurance operations, basically for us, we don't do with if, buts, and maybes. We only deal with absolute. So it means that we are looking at numbers, consistency, accuracy of things that is being reported. As we all know, all of us, I mean, we have just came out from the 3 years of crisis. Now, because of that pandemic situation, we have become much more wiser, which is true that now we are seeing people picking up back on growth development. Somehow it is still be driven very strong on fossil fuels and commodity booms. Of course, UNDP has mentioned that we are now at a situation where a growing gap between the growth that we actually get and the development that we actually want. When these things happen, we are focused on growth, jobs, poverty reduction, but it seems like whatever that is happening post-pandemic kind of situation, we are not actually reconciling back with sustainability. Efforts has been done, and that is why you see a lot of push in the topics of sustainability, a lot of push in the topics of social values, supply chain, health, safety, and well-being, collaboration, partnership is increasing, but also certification matters. But before that, I mean, I would like to bring everyone to the context that how does the world looks like today, okay? Based on our world in data, we are now at 8.09 billion of people in 2024, comparing, in the start of the millennium, we only at 6.71 billion people, okay? The GDP has increased tremendously to, around $60 trillion, which is In 2022, we are growing into $130 trillion. The emissions in 2020 is about 25.50 metric ton of CO2 equivalent, which is now 2024 is about 37.15 million metric ton of CO2 equivalent. Life expectancy, the recent ones, we are at 71 years old. 30 years ago, expectancy of life is only at 64 years old. Now, a very interesting question that we can build from this is basically the more people that we have these days, the richer we are getting, the polluted the air has become, but we actually live longer than expected. So these are the kind of like very simplistic question that comes into the thinking of this context. But definitely the last 5 years, despite the dynamics of political things in the Asian region, governance and regulatory updates that came into the picture, we are also seeing our development pathways are now more equitable and inclusive of the people. So from our observations, we have seen organizations, societies has started to invest in data to have a better decision-making process. People are pursuing growth that meets the needs of the people and also the environment, surprisingly. And then we have now, amazingly, we have leaders that are anchored with knowledge. Previously, if I reflect back on my career path 15 years ago, it's mostly that our bosses will say that you guys go for training, I'll sit here and make that approvals. But it changes now. Even the leaders are now anchored with the knowledge. And of course, because of all of these things, there's a lot of acceleration in moving some of these efforts to be more practical, to be more implementable at a very fast pace. But when we talk about ESG reporting, right, the elements of ESG itself is now being heavily integrated into organization, where the growing focus of ESG, especially at portfolio management and risk management, has increased quite well. And the portion is around almost half of each of these matters. But when we talk about organizations that are now committed to net zeros, is basically we are looking at a very significant increase from the 2018 up to 2023. And these have shown that the awareness is there. It's just that how we want to speed things up and what is actually needed, that is actually still a lot of organizations are still discussing. And of course, with the data that has been shown, basically the demand in transparency, accountability, responsible business practices is now at all-time high. So organizations are now looking into more aspects of integrated reporting and materiality focus, because they really want to target which one that really matters for them. And of course, all of this reporting, it's disclosed through a set of standards, such as the ISO standards or whatever standards that usually organizations apply. And the ESG emphasis has really come into picture. It's no longer talk purely about financial, how much that I've spent this year for these activities and stuff, but it is more centric towards the ESG related matters. Stakeholder engagement has become really critical, whereby the involvement of stakeholders, the say from your stakeholders actually influence some of the operations or activities being conducted. Technology, data analytics is very important. Clean data is in demand. The use of artificial intelligence also comes into the aspect when like I mentioned just now, there are certain decision-making aspects are now being integrated with a very good when you have a very good technology and data. But whatever that you see on the top of the screen right now, it's always important. There are two things that comes down back is actually the actions that you did and its impact. So people are actually looking what are the actions and impacts from the activities, from the operations that you are dealing. Again, coming back to build that confidence, this is where you need whatever that you declare, disclose, basically claim and everything, you need a third party assurance. This is because an independent body, such as BSI, would give that extra confidence towards your shareholders, towards your stakeholders, and it gives a much more kind of like sense of, okay, I am very confident from the customer aspect of things. Now, as I mentioned, data is kind of like a new oil. Okay, just how I'm gonna bring this into analogy is basically, it's data in the digital age comparing to the oil during the industrial age. The need is like that. Okay, where all of these things underscore some sort of a transformative potential of data to drive sustainable development. Because only when you collect good quality data, you can actually make a certain move or activities that actually talks back to your purpose of sustainability. By leveraging this data effectively, society can actually address some of the environmental challenges, promote social equity, and achieve economic sustainability. Example, yeah, this is a very simplistic example again, for us to get the context in. For example, you look at a building that uses a utility meters that track your electricity, water, and gas usage. These are the basic data that you can collect and look at the trends and everything. And then you adopt the energy efficiency methods based on the data, because you already know, okay, at this particular month, maybe it's a little bit hot or maybe it's a bit colder. You need to, turn up the heat and everything. So some of the measures can be put into place once you have a clean data. And of course, when you are actually taking care of the, situation in terms of energy efficiency, the well-being of the tenants are now going to be kept well, comfortable, and feel a little bit more safer with those measures. And of course, this is continuous improvement that can be governed by a strong data that you collected. So I mean, every year you can take a lessons learned from this year, from this kind of situation. So these are a basic example that you can actually report back. It's simple, but it tells that flow of a story. So BSI has a very huge role in the ESG space, especially. I mean, again, we are one of the founding members of the ISO, and there's a lot of standards that we have these days talks about the ESG. So, for example, you got your under the E, you got your usual suspect, the 14,001 environment management system. Then you have the 64 GHG, 50,001 energy management, and the list goes on over there. Interestingly, previously we had the PAS 2060. Now, it has been changed into ISO 14068 carbon neutrality pathway to net zero. Okay, so if you look at the slides that is shown right now, I also extracted some of the key areas at the bottom of the slide. So basically, it tells you if you are doing these standards and requirements and everything, you are addressing issues at this area. So again, just now I did mention about materiality focus. So if your materiality focus at one of these topics areas, this is how you actually navigate your ESG solutions into the reporting. Apply these standards, will be much more easier for you to do. Of course, our role, BSI, just a little bit, just to inform everyone, we do have capacity building and training programs that talks about, organization on best practices for decarbonizing, including workshops of energy efficient technologies, sustainable supply chain management, sustainability reporting assurance, GRI, Bursa requirements, everything. All of these in the space of ESG, we have the training program built for you. So please feel free to look at BSI website to get. And of course, there are certain special trainings that you can actually get your, your Kitemark logo to be put as part of your credentials. For example, you can see on the screen, it's either you can get your GHG practitioner or GHG professional logo to be included as part of your credentials. Compliance monitoring with regulatory standards is also where we look in place. We keep ourselves abreast with some of these updates, and just to make sure that we can actually help organization to meet some operations with the upcoming environmental regulation or social regulations. If you have been looking at the space of BSI on the web, basically we have been talking about EUDRs. We have been talking about some of the upcoming regulations that is kind of like prominent and critical for your operation. And of course, for us, verification of sustainable practices is one of the key things that we have over here. I mean that we can provide a rigorous verification process, again, as a third-party independent assurance to ensure organization actually adhere to these sustainable practices. Again, certification builds that reputable kind of like story for organization, and it shows a demonstration and commitment towards your environmental responsibility. And of course, a certain standards, a certain ISO standard that you opted for, you can get again the BSI Kitemark put into your promotional items, put into your certification. So coming back on how we actually navigate some of these matters, okay, we have to understand that some of the standards that is available out there, and sometimes it's regulation, and the regulations are connected with in sense of acronyms, jargons, and everything. But again, all of this thing has its fundamental elements, and also, of course, from that fundamental elements, you got your frameworks and actually what has been done in terms of at the regulation stage. If you look at the right side of the screen right now, everything is on the base of either your SDGs, your Paris climate agreement or greenhouse gas protocols. These are what we call the global goals that set the tone for the countries to actually do and, embark on and, improving the kind of situation that we are having. And of course, this is assisted by some of the reporting frameworks that is available out there, standards and everything. For example, you got your famous ISO, GRI, and SBTI these days. TCFD, again, TCFD has been disbanded, but it is something that some people are still reporting. But we are looking also the future of IFRS for S1 and S2. Again, I'll explain on this a little bit later. But once this reporting frameworks is done, this is where you see the roles of regulation at the top of things. Basically, regulations does sometimes they did not stipulate which exactly that you have to follow, but there are certain rules that has been set. It means that recognition on GRI, recognition on ISO. So you can see that some of this regulation actually brings all these frameworks all together, and in the end, it answers back to the global goals that is needed. So again, this is how actually one of the things that you navigate. You have to understand how the steps work from the regulations, from the reporting frameworks, and how do you intend to achieve your global goals. So everything actually starts, with a brand ecosystem kind of thing. You have to understand what is your brand ecosystem. I mean, for us in general, if you look at this is where you do kind of like a stepwise approach. Phase one is basically you build the foundation at your own facilities. You start to employ those environmental risk management, water management, greenhouse gas reporting reduction, energy management. And then once you settle this, you kind of like stable yourself up, go to phase two, okay, whereby you engage your supply chain, talk to them about environmental risk management, greenhouse gas reporting and reduction, because basically they already become your methods of scope 2 and 3. All right, and then you can talk about second party supplier audits, sustainable procurement and supplier qualification. Look at these elements to ensure that whatever is feeding into your sites and facilities is something that has already covered the elements of E and SG. Okay, so then you go to phase three, whereby this is where the achievement comes into the picture, that you celebrate the real outcomes through certification and awards. Okay, basically from ESG reporting, you can able to tell those outcomes, listing on sustainability indexes, and also some sustainability assurance reporting through can be either integrated reporting, annual report, or a standalone sustainability report. So again, this is where all of these three phases, you always need to report and communicate the journey, the efforts, the activities that has been done. So this is the one of the kind of like summary simplistic way that you move around these areas. So how do you actually see this in place? Now, a lot of questions that came in to us previously was actually what is the steps that I should start, regardless of 40,064 or 40,068? Where does the tone actually start? So over here, again, another simplistic summary or example that you can actually use in terms of setting the foundations. It's always important that you kind of like have that culture. The criteria over here is culture and top management. This is where commitments, regular agendas, committees development, partnerships, and to have competent leaders to actually have that strong voice to drive that organization into the role of ESG. Then you adopt all of these things into risk management practices where you get your stakeholder participation, risk around products, fix your data. Again, data came back over here, practicalities of the activities that you have chosen. Sorry. Important to note that policies and procedures must be set in place, must be communicated. It has to fit your industry. You have to identify and update what are the necessary policies, procedures, and if possible, integrate those. Don't have all of these procedures, scattered around and everything. And once you have this set up, governance and system must be made clear in terms of responsibility. What are the disclosure elements that you choose? And is there any benchmarking with your peers around these matters? Control must be put in place. You have to see whether your framework ready or not to drive the ESG matters. You need to have also control within other departments of the organization, especially at legal, finance, operations. And you kind of like have to set some sort of like a codes in terms of, what are the controls. For example, competency. Does this person have a code 1, 2, 3 in order to do job 1, 2, 3? So that's kind of one of the things that we look when it comes to verification. Awareness is important. Employee and stakeholder communication is the key. Also, whatever that you did, whatever activities that you're going to embark, you need to have that awareness built around your stakeholders and employees. Very well informed leaders as well, because again, your leaders will do the top of the organization. They need to be aware, they need to be well informed of what's going on. Those things needs to be recorded properly, documented, and ideally it is easily accessed by everyone. Again, the ESG also talks about the spirit of transparency. Now, it's always important in the things that you do, you have to have that reporting element. Again, that's why we are in the session today. We report these matters, investigation and remediation. So when you talk about regardless of reporting, investigation, and remediation, you have to understand there are scoping around what needs to be reported, what needs to be investigated, and what needs to remediate. And all of these things must comply to a certain set of requirements. Again, we have talked about data quite a few times already. Data needs to be easy to fetch when it comes to report, investigation, and remediation. Of course, you have to get that expectation of solving things, of reporting aligned with what is needed. For example, if the expectation in Malaysia, we use the stock exchange Bursa. If the expectation from Bursa is to report using GRI or IFRS as 1 as 2, definitely follow that expectation, align those expectations. Whatever it is, monitoring, this is the last part. Monitoring is very critical, because once you monitor, you can verify regularly the due diligence, not just at the corporate unit level, but at the downside of things as well, at the units itself. Okay, and of course, always have that testing of controls when it comes to monitoring, to see the effectiveness of things that is being implemented. So this is how you actually tailor the ESG kind of story and put it into place. I guess that's pretty much should help. But I'm sharing a little bit of insights of what's going to happen until December this year. All right. One thing for sure, there will be a lot of talk about climate risk management. This is kind of like now embedded in organizations. Artificial intelligence will be coming more into the picture, especially at this if AI can actually help in decision-making process. Human rights in supply chain, again, we have not talked a lot about human rights in supply chain, but it's very important that you keep the issues updated within your organization. I've mentioned IFRS, a little bit of extra over here. Now, a lot of regulators or stock exchanges are now looking at IFRS S1 or S2. S1 is the generic ESG disclosure. S2 it talks about specifically at greenhouse gas level. So these are the things that really come into the picture. In February this year, IAF and ISO has released a joint communique in terms of additional climate change consideration into management system standard. Please have a look at BSI website. We do have more information on this. But in essence, to inform everyone over here, what's going to happen is if, for example, you're already being, ISO 9001 certified, there will be a climate change consideration into that quality management system. You have to start to build on that. And of course, the famous one, you get your EUDR, your CSDDD comes into the picture. Heavy regulations, a lot of organizations in Southeast Asia, in Asian countries are now being impacted, especially if you're selling your products, if you're operating in the EU kind of landscape. So be aware of this regulation as well, what is needed, what needs to be done and everything. Okay. And of course, definitely I see until December, as the trend speaks, actually, we are seeing increased number of independent verification, especially at, ISO 14064, 68, and also sensitivity reporting assurance, because you are going to reach at the end of the financial year, at the end of the operation year, whereby you need to start to collect your data for reporting. Now, of course, we at BSI, we walking the talk on issues of sustainability. It means that our mission is not just to inspire trust, excellence, and safety organization, but we want to create positive change for the world. And this is through our certification, training, and assessment at the following areas you can see on the screen: JHG, water and waste, ethical supply chain, and the infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure. And of course, sustainability is the most pressing issues we are facing today. We are the first generation to actually fully face the impact of climate change. And this is a fact that has been mentioned. So that's why sustainability is very important, especially for BSI clients. Around 98% of our clients so far agrees that it is important. The customers of BSI client also around 98%. The society at large is at 95%. So basically, we can say that 80% of the BSI clients actually believe that if we focus on sustainability, it will protect the organization, the business for a very long term. So how does it's going to look like? I mean, I've been talking about all this verification, all these ISO standards, but if you were to choose BSI, it's very simple. These are the documents, these are the certificates that you're going to see in your, that we're going to give it to you. Please feel free. You can use it for your sustainability report or whatever, you can put in your website and everything, but be proud of this achievement. I would say that if you have the Kitemark, the Royal Charter, the BSI logo as part of your certificate process, it gives that extra boost of confidence. But how does it look like in essence? These are the examples that we can show to you. Product covered footprint and sustainability reporting assurance. These are the documentations that you get. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I will end, as you know, any presentation, you might want to end up with a quote. So a quote from Mary Robinson is very simple. Real change, you endure the change, happens at one step at a time. It happens with a vision, with hope, with courage, and with hard work. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I'm going to pass to Kai. Kai, over to you, man.
Thank you, One. Brilliant presentation, I tell you. This is really good. Let me see. Okay, next. Okay, fantastic. Brilliant presentation on ESG. We see that, and what I'll be walking through with you, ladies and gentlemen, is the E part or within ESG. So we're going to dive in slightly deeper on the product carbon footprint and carbon neutrality. So it'll be very interesting for us to go through this, right? So as I walk through with you my presentation today, I'll touch a bit on the global trends, the product carbon certifications that we have, and to give you a bit of a deep dive on how international standards play a role in creating a robust certification, right? And the specifications and requirements that the scheme requires. What is your role in this journey, and how BSI, as you can see at the top of our this one, our motto is to be your partner in progress. And I would also like to love to share with you a real life case study that has embarked on this journey, and the values that we have created for them in moving towards a more sustainable value chain for their stakeholders, right? So, to start off, to touch a bit on the global trends, we see we are living in the age of consumerism, where 75% of consumers have changed their purchasing habit to have more environment in mind, especially our Gen Z millennials. We are very, very environmental conscious when it comes to our purchasing habits. So, initially, we will look at the safety and quality aspects when purchasing a product. But now, another question has come into our mind: where is this product being sourced from? What are the packagings made from? What are the carbon footprint, the GHG? Is this environmental friendly? So these questions are starting to rise among our consumers. And with that in mind, businesses, around 8,267 businesses, have actually made pledges to decarbonize their products and services. So these global businesses includes top FMCG businesses, even manufacturers, producers, are all moving towards a more decarbonized supply chain within their business, right? And we look as an overall carbon market. This is an 851 billion market, which has expanded 164% in 2021. And it is still growing rapidly, as we see that there's so many technologies, regulations, drivers are coming into place to move towards decarbonization. And when we look at a product level, right, we see that having labels that shows a product has a reduced carbon footprint or a carbon neutrality status allows producers or manufacturers to put a 50% premium, as because the key here is to add more value to their product. And by adding more value, they've actually captured all the essences that the consumers are looking at. So this allows them to gain a whole new price point and elevate their product's value, right? And on top of this, speaking about drivers and regulations, we are now living in an era, as we can see with one's brilliant presentation earlier, how ESG's regulations are forming, and they are requiring, even the QMS are requiring to look at an environmental standpoint. So there's around 20 full of regulations are coming into place. Some of the top key regulations that I can share with you for at a product level is that we see that in the EU market, there are regulations coming where battery manufacturers need to declare their carbon footprint. And of course, having a reduced carbon footprint will be an advantage to them. We look at digital product passport coming into place where they are required to declare their product's carbon footprint. And ESPR, Eco Design Sustainability Product Requirements Regulation, requires them to have all this recycled content, carbon footprint, all to be declared as this. So although currently it's not being mandated this year itself, but we see these regulations taking shape and to be implemented in the next 2 to 3 years. So it's very interesting times that we are living with, and it gives a whole lot of opportunity for esteemed organizations like yourself in this call to move and to make sure you put your organization at the very forefront of this trend, right? So, with to share with you now on the carbon certification, I need to share with you an interesting label that we have in the BSI, which is the BSI Kitemark. So the BSI Kitemark is the first mark of trust that has been for 120 years in the business. So we just celebrated our 120th anniversary last year. So this BSI Kitemark is a recognized mark of quality and safety. So where we started by certifying tram lines in the UK, we've expanded globally. You can see our marks from window panes, doorknobs, safety locks, manholes, and now we have expanded it to become a beacon of sustainability achievements, right? And having this mark, it enables you to differentiate your product, give you a competitive edge, and for you to gain more market access. And as I said earlier, to elevate your product or your organization to make sure how do we create more trust and value in the product that you say. So to put it as it is, when you see the BSI kite mark, you are rest assured that the product or the organization does what it says that the mark is saying. And for us to touch in today deeper is the carbon neutral kite mark. So when you see the carbon neutral product kite mark or the carbon neutral service kite mark on products or services, you can be rest assured that they have been assessed against international standards and they have passed a rigorous scrutiny and criteria by BSI to make sure those products and services have achieved carbon neutrality. And I think this is a very interesting topic, as you can see how the landscape is evolving, right? So to share a bit with you the elements that are underpinning this scheme, the carbon neutral product and service kite mark, we look at the very first, and this is how we will share with you how standards play a role in this picture, right? Is the first. So under the E pillar for under ESG, we look at the one I'm going to touch today is ISO 14067 2018. So this is a carbon footprint standard where it, as an organization that manufactures products or services, you are able to quantify and report your product's carbon footprint. So this is a very important standard because I say it lays the foundation of the scheme and it is the shield against any greenwashing claims. Because why? This standard pulls on principles from life cycle assessment. So if life cycle assessment as a whole, it has many parameters it looks into it, but this pulls in all the GHG and carbon aspects and they have put it into this particular standard. And it creates a robust methodology for you to quantify your carbon footprint. And that's where BSI will verify against this as a first one, how do you calculate your product's carbon footprint? The next is the standard, which was launched in December last year, 2023, a brand new standard replacing past 2060, so which is the ISO 14068 Part 1. So now that you have calculated your product's carbon footprint, the next step is how do you go towards carbon neutrality? How do you reduce? What principles do you need to take? So all this is being guided by a very robust framework in this standard, which is also part of the net zero agenda that we are moving towards too, right? And finally, what makes kite mark a kite mark is that there's extra additional requirements that we put in place that goes above and beyond. So we have a continuous assessment with ongoing monitoring yearly basis to make sure that you have a carbon neutrality management plan in place with your carbon neutrality pathway. So it's very interesting one thing that you will need to know is that with sustainability, it is always interconnected with many, with even so if you're doing SBTI, it influences with this scheme, it has connections as you go with regulations, this will complement that regulation and so on. So this is where it helps you to differentiate your product. So this is the framework that we have for the carbon neutral kite mark, right? So to touch very quickly on what you should know about ISO 14067. So we know that it uses the LCA principles. So there will be some terminologies here, and we have trainings, client-facing trainings, or trainings for you to keep yourself to keep you up to date what the standard requirements are. So this is where it pulls from the cradle to grave cycle from the point of raw material extraction to the point of landfill. And if you have circularity elements within your product or organization, you're able to close the loop for your life cycle assessment, right? So the output that you'll be generating, the key output, people ask me that, Kai, what is the thing that ISO 14068 produces that we need to be very aware of? So it is always the product carbon footprint report. So product is defined as goods and services in the ISO 14067. So when you see me saying product, it's always both either goods or services as well, right? So it could be events, it could be many such. So this is the carbon footprint report that you will generate, how you have quantified and reported your methodology in calculating that, which BSI will come in and verify all those according to what the standard says. The next is the carbon neutrality part. You have quantified, now moving towards carbon neutrality. What you should know about the ISO 14068 Part 1. So this is a very brief snapshot on what the ISO 14068 Part 1 says, right? So don't worry, we won't be going into the intricacies and the technicalities of this graph. It looks complicated, but I'll simplify this for you. So if you look at point 1, this is your first application period for initial assessment, saying that this is your first time claiming carbon neutrality. Previously, with past 2060, it allows you to go with 100% carbon offset during the first claim period. And this is where a lot of we see entities, they go the first period, they use 100% carbon offset, and then they stop. They're done. There's no continuation, there's no improvement. And this standard has changed that. So even the first application period, you need to ensure there are GHG emission reduction has taken place before you can make any claims. And with the kite mark, you need to make sure there's ensure progressive and gradual GHG emission reductions for your product or services. So if you look, it will be going down the slope as time goes on. So that's why with kite mark, it is not a one-off verification. We make sure we go in every year to make sure your footprint is what you say it is. You have continuously reducing. The keyword is reducing and achieving carbon neutrality at the same time. So that's how we make it as robust as it goes, right? And to touch a bit on a few key points. So as you were saying earlier, how I was saying about overlapping, interconnection, how sustainability, it's a lot of branches that overlaps with each other. So if you're going with SBTI or so many other pathways where you are recognized, those will give you a mileage for you to go towards carbon neutrality, because in the ISO 14068, it requires you to have a carbon neutrality pathway that aligns with any of those that are similar with SBTI. And so you don't have to be certified with SBTI, but you need to have a pathway following the principles that SBTI have. And with 14068, it has a hierarchy approach. So meaning that, you remember initially with PAS 2060, you can straight away go with 100% offsets. So with this, we will ensure that you have make sure that reductions are in place. The second priority is you have actually done some removals from your supply chains, the removal of GHG emissions to the atmosphere from your supply chains. And only finally, the last one is we allow offsetting for the carbon footprint, with provided there are ongoing gradual reductions of your carbon footprint. So the key two outputs from here is, so if ISO 14067 was the product carbon footprint report, the ISO 14068 is the carbon neutrality management plan, and there's also a carbon neutrality report that you will need to produce, and BSI will verify. So to look a bit on the scope of certifications, the BSI carbon neutral product allows for goods. So it can be Kitemark allows for goods, processed goods, hardwares. And for our services, we go for recurring services because we want to make sure that there's an ongoing monitoring element, that we are able to make sure that those services that you're providing, for example, transport services and whatnot, if you're using electrical vehicles to do your transporting and so on, those are eligible to go for carbon neutral service kite mark. So a quick example there, right? We do have our out of scope elements like one-off services and events at the time being are out of scope because there are some elements that need to be enhanced, but we will be expanding it further as we go, right? And the scope of emissions and assurance level, you'll be very familiar with all three scopes, scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. You must be calculated for the carbon neutrality when you want to go there. And in terms of assurance level, BSI provides a reasonable assurance for your scope 1 and scope 2, and limited assurance for your scope 3, which looks at the upstream and downstream activities, right? And to look at certification boundaries, this is a very important element, because what we have decided and the standard has enhanced is that for any consumer facing products or services, the certification boundary, the meaning that you must calculate your carbon footprint from cradle to grave, to make sure that we have not missed out any life cycle stages. So this is very important because we don't want there to be any manipulation, so that when a consumer picks up a product from the grocery store, uh, it is only from cradle to gate, whereas that is consumer facing product. So it needs to calculate the whole cradle to grave boundary for a product or services for it to be carbon neutral, right? We only allow cradle to gate for business facing products. So this is products where from the raw material extraction up to the point it leaves the production facility of the business, right? So only this one, and both of these will have different marketing tiers that they can do to convey the message to the consumers. To share with you our certification process. So this is typically we have a scoping form. So now you've gone through this webinar, you've gone through trainings, you are now interested with this. So we go take a scoping form, we have a contract signed, and then typically we have a document review stage 1 and stage 2. So this is where we will do through the assessment process to check the evidence trail on your calculation, how you have calculated your carbon footprint, how have you done your reductions on site, to make sure that the technologies that you say you're doing, those removal, reduction initiatives that you're doing are actually being done, and the scale that is being done. And then to look at, we have an extra step, which is an independent review. So an independent assessor within BSI will check the work that all that has been done to make sure that there's no impartiality issues, everything is in order, those facts are correct, and then we will issue the certificate to you, right? And then as an ongoing process, we have our year-on-year visits to make sure that you are continuously achieving your carbon neutrality status. So it takes approximately 6 months or so, depending on client readiness and fulfillment of standards criteria for you to the point of application for you to get your certificate in hand. So we've seen clients who have managed to get this within even within 3 months as well, depending because as they are more very familiar with the whole ISO 14064, the standards and everything. So they have a sustainability team within the business to help them drive this initiative, right? So that allows them to expedite a lot of the processes. So your journey, which is very interesting. So we know that BSI, being your partner in progress, we understand that we are the very everybody has different stages in their level of readiness and understanding in terms of the sustainability landscape, and that's why we have a stage approach when we are moving towards carbon neutrality and how do we help you in to guide in this process, right? So at the very beginning, we do have our trainings that we can support you, which one has covered earlier. On top of that, once you're more familiar, now awareness has been started with this webinar. You want to know more details, you've gone through our ISO trainings that we offer. And then now that you want to actually implement this in your business as a stepping stone, we will always recommend you to go with the ISO 14067 carbon footprint verification. So this is a very straightforward awareness verification scheme where the standard that we are using is only the ISO 14067 to verify what you have calculated. So if I'm saying that my cup of coffee is 100 kgs of CO2 equivalent, BSI will go in and verify that yes, it is indeed 100 kg CO2 equivalent, and that's pretty much it. There's no reduction, no carbon neutrality. It's a one-off verification where BSI gives you an opinion statement, and you're able to put this lozenge, this mark of trust on your product. And this statement is valid 2 years, and every 2 years you will need to update your footprint. And so the North Star, and then starting from this, once you're more comfortable, you're more ready towards your reduction, your removals that you're able to do, then we steer you towards the carbon neutral kite mark to give you more value added. How do you have these ongoing reductions and so, right? So annual surveillance and the validity is also for 3 years. So this is the journey that we have set for organizations, for clients to move towards carbon neutrality. And now to share with you just very quickly, I will go through some statistics on what the consumers think about carbon neutral kite mark and basically GSG as a whole. So we did a survey with YouGov or in UK, China, US, and India, where we see almost 1 out of 2 consumers, sorry, are more likely to select a product when it has the kite mark itself. The kite mark brings its own value. We are able to create more value to your products. A product has better reputations when they see the kite mark on it, and they are willing to spend more, up to 10 to 15% price premiums when they see that this product or services has the kite mark, because they are guaranteed with the quality and the claim that is being made with the product, right? So this is where we see that clients that we have are from globally, where we can see that we have clients from big brands across in Asia Pac, and also with Morrison's. It's our pilot project that we have in the UK. So with this, we can see that there's also this is our pilot project where we certified a carbon neutral eggs with Morrison's in the UK, where they're able to achieve carbon neutrality by reductions and removals. So they're able to, if you look at the background, it says that the price of the free range eggs are 35 pennies. So typically, and a free range egg in the UK would cost around 20 pennies. But with the kite mark, and so they're able to access a whole new price point and to create more value to their clients, right? And what they have done is with Morrison's, they have actually reduced their carbon footprint up to 60% for their Morrison's eggs. So, and I'll share with you quickly what they actually did. And they're very proud. You can see this testimony at the top, at the below. They're very proud to be the first to the market for this kite mark scheme. And to share with you, how have they actually achieved that 60% reduction? Typically people will see like, okay, they implemented solar panel and everything. That seems to be like the obvious answer, like, oh, every time there's a huge sustainability initiative, it always has got to do with solar panel. But what I want to share with you, which is very, very interesting, is that how they have actually analyzed their supply chain and they have actually do a hotspot analysis to find that which part of their supply chain is the most emitting carbon and how they have tackled that. So this is in the second point, where they see that their feedstock, which involves bringing in soy for their hen, was a huge carbon footprint for their product. What they did is they replaced that with insects and with food waste that they have within their supply chain to have a circular feedstock that they're able to do within the UK itself. So they don't have to buy soy from another part of the world to give their hens the feedstock that it needs. So this has significantly reduced their carbon footprint. So what I want to highlight is, the answer is not always about implementing solar panels, but also by looking at your supply chain, you are able to have a very close, a magnified look in your supply chain in order for you to reduce your carbon footprint, right? And the rest, they do have woodlands that to capture and store the carbon, and also other efficiencies that they've done within their production site to achieve this carbon neutrality, right? So we do offer QR codes to as a part of the Kitemark scheme for us to elevate the message. So when you consumers scan the QR code, their packaging, they are brought to a BSI hosted landing page. So this is a page where BSI verifies all the information that BSI has verified for the product. Like example, for the Morrison's egg, we have put on this QR code so that when consumers scan them, they are rest assured that it is not Morrison's who are saying they are carbon neutral. This BSI saying that we have gone in, we have checked all the stages, and they are indeed carbon neutral itself. So to share with you, this is where Morrison's, they're able to be the market leaders in their industry. So just recently on the 9th of July, a couple of weeks back, the Morrison's won the Innovation of the Year award as we have certified them, and they've got the highly commended in the Sustainable Farming Awards, where even our BSI representatives have joined this award-winning session with them, and to see that, how do we actually help them elevate their businesses and their products, right? So that's a very quick one from me. This is the value proposition, which I will touch very quickly. So this is what we see is we help consumers make informed choices, create a traceable sustainability story, and have businesses get a good brand reputation and get competitive edge within their industry and within the market. So thank you, and I'll pass back to you.
Thank you very much, Kai and Wan, for your insightful sharing. And we will move on to our Q&A session. And speakers, if you were to look at the Q&A chat box, we did receive a lot of questions. And thank you, Wan, for already responding to most of them. So maybe I'll start off with Kai. I will just pick, but you can also pick some of the questions. I think I will go with the first one. What is the difference between product carbon footprint from life cycle assessment?
So
One?
life cycle assessment. Sorry. Will you be going through all, and then I'll?
No. One by one.
Okay. So the product carbon footprint is very GHG centric. So life cycle assessment has many parameters it looks like. So it looks after. So for example, it doesn't only look at the carbon aspect for life cycle assessment. It looks at eutrophication levels. How does the product impacts the environment? So there's air, soil, water. There's so many other elements that comes into place. Whereas product carbon footprint is very GHG within the remits of GHG itself. Yeah.
Thank you, Kai. We have one question for Wan. How does the GHG emission calculated? Is it using a software?
Well, there's a lot of ways of doing GHG calculation. Obviously, there are certain softwares out there and software providers that have these calculators, but there are also methods that you can use. For example, very simple small organization we have seen using just Excel. You just have to understand what is the emission factor, how much energy that is being used, how much actually diesel or petrol that you are using. Put those numbers in, times those emission factor, then you will have your generic GHG equivalent, CO2 equivalent kind of things. So again, the answer is there is no one specific emissions calculator. There are tons out there. There are even for example, Malaysia, you have the one endorsed by the MGTCs, by the government. But then again, you have to choose your own calculator that suits your organization, that suit your budget, especially, and also the industry that you are in. Thanks.
Thank you, Wan. I'll pick another question. For steel manufacturing company, would the scope for, I would assume this is for carbon neutral product, for product and services, would the scope be from cradle to grave or cradle to gate? Over to you, Kai.
Yeah. So for this, we see it's more likely to be a cradle to gate scenario because usually the steel manufacturers, it's not an end product by itself. So this is where we will call this a declared unit, where it is a product that will enter into another system boundary for another product. So typically it's a cradle to gate certification. And yep, I'll be more happy to go in more detail if you can go offline later. Yeah.
Yep, sure. Thank you, Kai. I'll pick one more. Assuming that a company has already calculated their GHG emission for scope 1, 2, 3 using GHG protocol, do they need to recalculate them based on ISO 14067 standards?
So GHG protocol and ISO 14067, these are both they have been very long in this space. It's not about recalculating, but it's more about realigning those calculations to the requirements of 14067. So I wouldn't say recalculating, it's just that fitting it back properly within the ISO 14067 requirements and this. There's not much of a huge difference. It's just about making sure that requirements are being met. Yeah.
All right. I have a question here in the Q&A chat box, which is also very similar to one of the questions we received during registration. It really asks about, whether application of all these standards are applicable to industry of all size. For example, SME, or like, what's your comment on that? Maybe over to one.
Okay. Again, this kind of situation, you don't have a one size fits all kind of things, but there is always if everyone remembers during my presentation, one of the key things that is mentioned is regarding scoping. You have to understand what are your boundaries, the scope that you are getting into. So only with that, regardless 14064 or 68, it comes back to your scoping and boundaries. So look at that, and then it can be applied accordingly to your organization. Kai, maybe you got additional from that? I think that should be it, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, it always comes down to scoping, because once you've identified the goal and the scope, that's where everything else comes into place. Yeah, completely agree.
All right, I'll probably pick another two last question. Maybe this is relevant for Kai. So there's a question on cradle to grave. Does this mean that software and consulting firm will need it since it involves the entire life cycle of the product? Or is it possible to be done without software and consultancy?
Well, it's a very interesting question, because this is the time where I can see there's a huge opportunity for consultancies and software to offer the service to organizations, and so to do their calculation. And what I think is this software and consultancy will need to get the ISO standards. How can they give that value to the organizations? Because I see that a lot of GHG accounting softwares and platforms are in the market now, and they are helping organizations to move towards this. So it would be great that if they can align this calculation with the ISO standards, and so to create more value for organizations. So yes, it creates this demand, because as we are moving, a lot of regulations are coming into place and everything, and definitely an opportunity for software and consultancy in GHG. Yeah.
Thanks, Kai. And since you're on that topic, there's another relevant related question. So for transportation and logistic company, for example, would the boundary be from cradle to grave as well?
Transportation and logistics companies,
Yeah,
yes, it will be
services.
from cradle to grave. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And one last question. See which one should we pick. I think we also have a list from the registration. So there is one that asks, how do we include postgraduate students into this type of discussion on sustainability, so that they are more aware of what to do, what are the steps to take in order to immerse themselves in this aspect when they are in the workforce?
I'll take that first. Very
Thank
easy.
you.
Come to BSI and get trained with us. I mean, in essence, right? If you look at our BSI training calendars and the offerings that BSI have, we got a very extensive kind of learnings, very interesting. all the E, S, and G, and we do have the social bit is quite strong also with us. So, postgraduates, university students, get let's get that partnership rolling. Come to BSI for training programs. I think that will be one first step that is awesome for everyone.
Maybe just take one last question because I do find that very important. What are some of the key challenges and gaps company face in meeting ESG reporting requirement? I mean, you have shared some. Maybe just to recap, maybe top two before we close the webinar.
Again,
Key
Suyin, challenges.
Yeah, key
Can I?
challenges and gap that company faces when they are trying to meet their ESG reporting requirements.
Okay, from what we have seen, our observation through verification and stuff, purely it's on data. That is the first round. The data completeness is not ready, but then again, you need that baseline. Okay, the challenges is quite critical on data, and number two is actually that the depth of awareness, which again comes back to trainings, capacity buildings, but often I see the ones I've seen, at least in Malaysia or Southeast Asia, is data and the capacity.
Thank you, Wan. We still have a lot of questions, but we will respond to those via email after the webinar. Thank you, Wan and Kai, for your very insightful sharing again, and thank you for those who attended our webinar today. That's the end of the webinar. Thank you very much. Our webinar will be closed now. Have a good day.